Yo guys, and welcome back. So today what I'm going to be doing is taking you through a tutorial on how to make your photos have that nice kind of Christmassy feel. So this is a Christmas season specific color grade to get that nice kind of bokeh in the lights if you've got them on a Christmas tree and if you're wearing a nice jacket, something like that, so you can get a nice Christmas look. So today I'm going to be taking you through how I made my image look like this. So first of all I'm going to start resetting all of this, and then I'll take you through the process on how to get it to look like this image. Okay, so this is the before of the photo. Obviously this photo has been taken in RAW. If you can do that, I would definitely recommend doing it. It definitely helps in terms of the editing process, so you can get as much out of your image as possible. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do on this image is take it towards the blue side of the spectrum for the white balance. That is simply because I'm trying to get more of a cool kind of look for Christmas, and then I'm going to try and take out some of these a little bit murky browny greens using the slider on this side. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to want to do with this image is take the white balance down towards the blue side of the spectrum. This is because we are, of course, now in the winter months, and I do want to make it look a little bit colder, a little bit more Christmassy. So that's what I'm going to do first, is bring this down a little bit. I'm thinking maybe about 3,400 should do. And then I'm going to adjust this slider here just to bring out those greens a little bit, maybe to about -1, -2. So as you can see, I've kind of got rid of those greens a little bit in the tree, just to kind of make it a little bit more of a realistic white balance. Okay, then what I'm going to do is go for that kind of darker feel, make it feel a bit more evening kind of time. So what I'm going to do is bring down the exposure just a little bit, not too much, down to about -0.3, I think, -0.35 should do it. Okay, I'm also going to bring up the contrast just a little bit more because I want to get those dark blacks around the tree and kind of make sure that this white fence really stands out against my dark coat and of course the dark bits in the tree. So I'm going to do that by bringing this up maybe only a little bit to about +10, +12 should do, I think. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is adjust the highlights. So that is because I want to get some nice oranges up here in the highlights and kind of bring down the whites a little bit. So I'm going to bring that down a little bit to about -20, I think, should look quite nice. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is bring up the shadows a little bit more because I do want some detail in the tree over here. So what I'm going to do is bring that up probably to about +30, I think. There we go, that looks quite good. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is kind of bring up that clarity a little bit, just to make it a little bit more sharp, bring up the contrast in various places, and to give it that nice kind of Christmassy look. So I will bring that up a little bit. So I think about +20 looks about right. So if I show you now the before and after doing these basic edits, that was before and now that is after. So as you can see, it does look a little bit more accurate to what you would expect to see if you went outside. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is come down to the tone curve. So I'm going to do my 3-point curve as I usually do. So put one dot there, one in the middle, and then one up here. Okay, so then what I really like in these kind of images is bringing up those shadows a little bit more so you can get that nice faded kind of look to make it look quite Christmassy and quite soft. You don't want to bring it up too much, too high that you crush everything out, but you kind of want to bring it up a little bit, so I think that looks quite nice there. The next thing I'm going to do is get the midtones, and you can use this graph here to see where most of your light and most of your image falls. So we've got lots in the shadows, not too much in the midtones, and minimal stuff going on in the highlights. So I do want to bring up the midtones just a little bit to get a bit more contrast back into the image. Not too much, that looks about right. The next thing I want to do is bring down those highlights. So I'm going to put another point just below here, put that back onto the main line if I can do. There we go, that'll do. And then bring down this top, just to kind of get rid of those highlights being super white. You obviously don't want to bring it down too far, but down here I think that should be decent. Okay, so that is without the tone curve, and then if you turn it on, that's the effect we're kind of getting. So I quite like that kind of faded look. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is come down to the Hue Saturation and Luminance panel, and I'm going to select all so I can adjust all three at once. Now the first thing I want to do is kind of focus on the yellows and greens of this picture, a little bit on the blues on my jacket, but mostly within the yellows and greens. Now I'm going to try and go for that kind of murky, browny, reddy kind of feel, and quite soft light. Everything feels a little bit warm, but at the same time looking quite cool. So I'm going to achieve that by making these greens and yellows quite browny and nice and warm, and then my jacket and hopefully the white of the fence should give that nice cool look to it as well. So I'm going to achieve that by adjusting the yellow panel and the green panel first. So first of all, I'm going to bring the yellows down so they're more kind of orangey, nice and warm, probably not that far, down to probably about -45. That should do quite nicely. And then what I'm going to do is bring the greens down to a nice kind of yellowy green and not super vivid. So as you can see, if I bring it up too far to the right, we get that kind of bright, vivid green, and we don't really want that. I like the kind of muddy, browny, yellow kind of colour. So I'm going to bring that down to about -30. That's looking pretty good so far. So now we've achieved that kind of nice warm look in the trees and in the lights over here. Okay, so then the next effect is going to be achieved in the jacket and scarf. So we'll find the colours for the jackets and scarf mainly in the blues and purple section of our sliders. So first of all we're going to focus on the blues and then move on to the purple. Okay, then I'm going to come down to the purple panel and adjust that, bring that to the right a little bit, just to kind of counteract what I've done a little bit, get rid of some of those greens and make it a nicer kind of colour. So I think probably about +33, +34, that's looking about right. Okay, so I'm not really going to mess with the saturation too much. I want this to be kind of a soft, minimalist image just to give you that kind of nice Christmassy feel. So I am going to come down to the luminance and focus on mainly the yellow, greens and blues, just because I want to make these lights up here, which are the yellows and oranges, pop. So I'm going to brighten those up, and then maybe various bits on the greens just to kind of bring out the highlights in the tree. Okay, so I'm going to focus on the lights first and bring up the oranges, probably to about +15, +16. As you can see, that's brightening my face up a little bit more, so I think about there should do it quite nicely. I'm going to focus on the yellows, and as you can see, that's doing the lights and the highlights quite a lot there. So I'm going to bring it up fairly high, probably to about +30, +40. That's looking about right. And then the greens as well, I'm going to bring those up, just to bring up those highlights here, especially on the leaves. Maybe not +70, probably to about +50, +55. There we go, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is come down to the split toning panel, and I find this kind of helps with getting those highlights and shadows that I was talking about earlier just perfect, so we can get the kind of look that I'm looking for. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to work with the highlights. What I like to do is bring the saturation up, probably to about 15. Yeah, that should do about 14, 15. And then I like to slide this across, just doing a first preliminary check, but I think I have a rough idea of where I want to put it. I'm going to press Alt and then slide across, and I'm looking for that nice kind of orangey, yellowy kind of colour for our highlights, just to kind of back up the lights we've got in the tree up here and the highlights up here. So as you can see, if I turn that off and on, it's kind of bringing it up a little bit more. So I'm going to do the same with that one. I'm going to put that up to 15, and then I'm going to see what I can do with the shadows. So as you can see, I've now got some nice warm colours, but I've also got some cold colours in the shadows. I do feel, however, they're a little bit too obvious in the shadows, so I am going to bring the saturation down a little bit. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is adjust the sharpening. The focus is not too bad, but I do want to make sure that I've got it all in focus. So I don't want to adjust the sharpening too much, but I am going to bring the radius up to 3. That means that I can mainly focus in on the face as opposed to doing the trees in the background. Now, if I bring up the sharpening too much, it's going to look a little bit crazy, so I think probably, let's see what it looks like at about 70. That's looking fairly alright, and as you can see, we've got a lot of grain in the image, but that's not too bad because I am going to go ahead and put some grain in the image a little bit later, so I wouldn't worry too much about getting that for this particular look. Obviously, you don't want too much sharpening because it looks a bit weird. Putting up to about 70 I think is okay. We can get away with it for this image simply because I'm going to go and put some grain in later. Now, just to counteract a little bit of that noise, I am going to put some noise reduction, not too much because I don't want it to look too soft, but just up to 14, just to kind of see if that brings it down a little bit. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to put some grain into the image and bring that up probably to about 30, not too high. Okay, so I'm going to leave the grain at around about 20, so there is an obvious grain there, but it's not too painful to look at. The next thing I'm going to focus on, and the final thing, is the camera calibration. So I'm going to zoom out again, click on fit so you guys can see the entire image. So as you can see, we have got a bit of grain going on in the image, and again, there's the before and there's the after. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is focus on the blue primary. This is the blues in the image, and it's going to kind of give us a nice look. So I'm going to bring that down a little bit just to kind of go for that soft, vague orange and teal look. Probably to about -30, see what that gets us. That's looking pretty decent. So there we go, that's pretty much the image done in terms of this kind of editing. So if I show you the before and now there's the after, you can see there has been some obvious editing going on here. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and use the brush tool just to kind of lighten up some areas and get some nice detail in the image. So the first thing I'm going to focus on is going through and adjusting the lights, putting some dots over the lights and then bringing up the temperature orange and the exposure just to kind of make the lights pop a little bit more in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back to you when I'm done. Okay, so what I've done now is gone ahead and put little spots of light over each of these individual fairy lights on the tree, just to kind of bring up the brightness and make them glow a little bit more. So I'm just going to turn them off and then turn them back on again by simply deleting it. So that's before, and then I'll bring them back now that's after. You can see a little bit of glow. Doesn't make too much difference, but it's definitely noticeable. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is kind of bring out some highlights on my jacket and my gloves and these little creases in my jeans, maybe on my jacket as well, my jumper, just to kind of bring me forwards a little bit and separate me from the background. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just bring up my exposure. Doesn't matter how high you bring it to start off with, just so I can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to rub over these little bits that are already noticeably lighter than the rest of it with my brush tool. Don't worry about it looking too bad to start with. And I'm just going to brush over the arms here, because as you can see, the light is falling from this side. This side of my body should be a little bit brighter than this side, and you can see you've got some highlights down here on my scarf and on my face. So I'm going to kind of make those a little bit more obvious to see. Okay, so now I'm going to come down and work a little bit on the jumper. So as you can see, this bit here, there's a little bit of light has caught on the jumper. So I'm just going to make that a little bit more obvious just by adjusting it now with this brush tool. Okay, so now if we zoom out, you can see what I've done. I am going to adjust this exposure a little bit and maybe bring down the saturation just a tad. Okay guys, so that is the end of today's video. I hope you did enjoy it. Just a nice little colour grade for you for Christmas kind of style, focusing a lot on the lights. If you do take your photo, try and focus on lighting, try and get some nice fairy lights behind you, and do focus on the lighting and the editing. It does make a massive difference. So that is the before image for you. As you can see, it's very green, quite warm, and the white balance is completely off. And then there is the after. As you can see, there is quite a bit of a difference, and you can see the highlights a little bit better. Okay, so that is the final image for you guys there. So I hope you did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to check out my Instagram. Will be down below on the bottom of the screen, and my brother's as well. You'll be able to see this photo has been posted, and you can go and check out some of our other works. So thanks for watching guys, and I hope to see you in the next video. Live long and prosper.